Welcome, every many and everyone, to this session of the 7th edition of the Plural Positivity World Conference. This session is presented by Verses, covering important and sensitive topics including addiction, self-limiting thoughts and doubt, CPTSD, chronic health issues, non-specified trauma. Please remember to prioritize your self-care during this session. You're encouraged to take breaks whenever needed and honor your collective emotional well-being. If you have questions for the presenter, please share them under the Questions tab so they can be addressed during the live Q&A. Afterward, we warmly invite you to visit this presenter's booth, where you'll find helpful PDFs and additional free resources. Now, without further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our wonderful presenter to you all. Here is Verses.
Hey.
Image description. A skater girl stands talking to the camera with a background with nice nature shots and a bare cream-coloured room.
We go by verses, collectively. My name... That's very DID. I don't know my name right now. That's okay. That's okay. It'd be like that. It'd be like that sometimes. Breaker. My name's Breaker. That's a very Breaker response. Very on brand for me. Patterns of speech. Cool. Okay, we go by verses collectively. My name's Breaker. We are going to introduce ourselves individually throughout this video. Versus is just like a collective, what a lot of us have agreed to be called on a whole. We use they, them pronouns. I use she, her pronouns. Other people will probably introduce their pronouns. Other labels we use include queer, neurodiverse. I do quite like neuro-spicy, autistic, ADHD, system of trauma survivors. We don't really gel with the label of DID, although that does best describe the symptoms we experience, but we don't like the way that it's categorized as a disorder when it doesn't feel like a disorder to us. Some people in here self-ID as persecutors, and they like that label, and they have reframed what that means to them. So if you hear us refer to our persecutors as persecutors, we are identifying them as they self-ID, and it's a positive thing for us, not like discriminatory.
Hi, my name's Violet. Mostly I go by Vi. I use she, her pronouns. Description: alt, punk, emo girls standing talking to the camera with a LGBTQIA+ symbol necklace. Black hoodie with black and white cat ears. Red and blue dyed hair. Kind of gothy makeup. And a t-shirt with a really cute angry looking wolf puppy as a cartoon drawn on the front. Trigger warnings may include generally talking about a lot of brain processes with a view to them being protective and also of skill sets that we can build to help make them more manageable. It's talked about in a very pragmatic way as symptoms that we experience, things like anxiety, racing thoughts, judgmental, critical thoughts, toxic shame, the fight-flight response. There will be a little bit of an explanation about what these things are and maybe what they look like. Anywhere that it's mentioned why our brain has the processes it does and what caused them to be there, it'll just be spoken about very broadly, like because of the caregivers we had, because of our past, because of our childhood, because of the things that were internalized at that time. Sometimes we just refer to it as because of gestures broadly, and we won't go into what any of our traumatic experiences actually were. We wanted to make this video because we have trial and errored our way through an awful lot of different skills and different barriers to why the skills weren't working, and different ways that we have clashed as a system before learning to come together and be able to communicate in a way that was effective and supportive for all of us in here. Our hope in putting all of this information together in the way that we have is that maybe it'll help some other systems to not have to trial and error quite so much. Most of our video will have a focus on the tools that we can build together as a system to help to make these symptoms more manageable, as well as what's happening in the brain, what processes happen as a result of trauma, with a view of being able to gain an organic level of self-compassion upon recognizing that these processes are just a biological experience happening, not a conscious choice, and it therefore making it easier to not judge ourselves when they happen, how to spot them, what things might tell us we're saying the fight response or the flight response, why compassion is so relevant in healing from trauma, and how we can support each other as a system in coming back to a place of safety. That's the main thing we hope people will be able to take away from our video. We hope that we can offer an alternative perspective in the way that we engage with ourselves and with each other and with the world, because learning how to engage in this different way for us has been one of the most relaxing things. One of the concepts that we hope people will take away from this, and that we absolutely invite people to try to practice as we watch this video together, is a concept from a mindfulness-based therapy called non-judgmental self-awareness. It's basically the act of just noticing, observing our experiences, observing our thoughts, observing our emotions, but not feeling like we are them or like we need to judge ourselves for what they are. Just recognizing that we are the observers and these are part of our experiences and whatever is coming up for us. It's the ability to keep coming back to the core concepts of there being nothing we need to do, nowhere we need to be, nothing we need to attune to, nothing expected of us, nothing to get right or wrong. Just reminding ourselves that showing up as we are is completely good enough. Our intention is that this video can be a resource that people can come back to again and again. Our hope is that it can feel like just being here, just giving yourself the space, just engaging as you are feels good enough, because it really, really is. I think the idea of self-compassion is that it's person-centered, so it meets every individual where they're at.
Hello, my name's Vince. I go by he, him pronouns. Description: an incredibly handsome and very humble guy who stands talking to the camera. Eyeliner, lots of piercings, dyed red spiky hair, black top, black and white shirt with a skull on it. For me, how I'm motivated to access compassion is through spite. Knowing I'm capable of more than the people who traumatised me. And while they live out their lives empty and alone, unable to even conceptualise the idea of compassion, I can learn more and more every day how to bring that to myself, how to let myself use it, how to feel better than they could ever dream of achieving. That makes self-compassion a victory to me, no matter what barriers I have in the way of accessing it. It makes it all entirely worth it to fight through those so that I can. Every second I choose to offer myself safety and nurturing and compassion and softness and gentleness and care. It is one more second that I am rebelling against every single thing that they planned for me. In a society that prioritizes capitalism and companies and corporations over the welfare of individuals, I think some of the greatest acts of rebellion that we have are to choose rest, to choose to slow down, to choose to prioritize our comfort in a world that tells us we are not allowed to do that. Our energy is our greatest resource, and we have the choice of where that goes, not them. Choosing not to shame and criticize myself like I know the people who traumatized us did, and like I know they live with every day within themselves, and I know they planned for me to live with every day inside myself. I take that control away from them, and I remind myself that it's mine. Every single time I refuse to criticize or shame myself, every single time I have my back, every single time I respond with kindness and compassion, every single time I choose to work collaboratively with the rest of my system. That is revolution. And as much as I enjoy knowing that they live their lives as cowardly, pathetic, lonely husks, unable to access anything within themselves, too afraid of what they might find to be able to even know themselves, much less offer themselves compassion or feel any of the joy it can bring. I like what we gain from it more. I like the opening up of worlds, and the depths of emotions that I didn't know were possible to feel. And every time I can relax and learn to give myself space or grace, every time we choose to take a new response and we're able to start creating a life for ourselves, that is more meaningful, more relaxing, and more enjoyable than anything in any of the worlds they've ever known. They sort of fall away into nothingness. What matters so much more is the experiences that we're all able to share, that we can prioritise. I think that's a lot of what self-compassion is, for me. On the surface, joyously spiting the people that never deserved our time from our past by being able to access realms of joy that they couldn't possibly. But deeper than that, it's about looking at what they expected for me, everything they told me I could have and I could be, and saying, no, you're wrong. What I can build is so much more. I used to think that being a persecutor meant proactively going out of my way to punish people who deserved it. And now, I couldn't think of a worse punishment than being completely irrelevant and excluded from our lives, and knowing that we are able to live them so much more fully and feeling so much more free than they ever dreamed of. What a sweet revenge that is.
It can look different for different people. It can look different on different days, and it can look different at different points in the journey. If I had an expectation of it needing to look the same, that would kind of be using the concept of self-compassion as a rod to beat myself over the head with. Not speaking from experience or anything. Something that we've learned is to allow it to look different and to try and work out what it really is for different people, what it can look like, and how we need to apply it to ourselves, rather than just thinking that there's this expectation of what self-compassion means and it has to look the same for everyone. Some of us really quite like it to be very, very warm and comforting and involve a lot of positive affirmations. For some of us, it feels really soothing to have somebody speak really warmly to us and offer us hugs and fluffy blankets and squishy toys. And for some of us, that would definitely engage more defenses because it would feel threatening or irrelevant in some way, and that would feel like not being seen and not being understood. So self-compassion has to come with equity. It doesn't look the same for every person, and that's okay. While we were creating this video, our partner actually asked us what it looked like for us, and he was describing it as a feeling. And while some of us can relate and think of like, oh yeah, the way I feel when I see a puppy, stuff like that, some of us were drawing a complete blank. And it took a while to understand that, like, sometimes we get that feeling of just like fire burning in our chest. When we explored it more, we realised that that feeling is what compassion feels like for some of us. A drive that fuels us with a sense of passion for justice and just absolute flaming certainty that we are going to do something, even if it's difficult. And it kind of comes with a hope that maybe the kids growing up in our system and maybe the people we give these tools to can have a softer view of compassion than some of us can see or understand. Maybe for them, compassion can be something gentle as well. But for us, those hopes in and of themselves are compassion. There is a lot of different things that compassion can mean. We started with this. I'm sure if you were going to add your own, it could go on pretty indefinitely. It connects to a lot of things in a lot of places. And that's just a picture in a journal of a mind map with compassion in the centre and lines coming out to link it to different concepts like meeting needs, protection, being given space, being asked what you need, being accepted as you are, being patient, having someone be patient with you, understanding, listening, care, showing care, curiosity, fire, fuel, drive, desire to alleviate suffering. Why do we need it? Just biologically, in terms of how it helps the brain. When they looked at studies for who would develop PTSD from traumatic incidents, the amount of compassion someone had internally and around them as supports was a better predictor for whether or not they'd go on to develop PTSD than the incident itself. We can reduce the impact of trauma massively by engaging with compassion. It is like a vaccine, an inoculation, a protection against trauma. Learning to implement and show compassion to ourselves at different points in different times, it's lessened the strain of just going through every day where it used to be just kind of survival based and just go until we burn out. It's really changed that to be able to slow down and sink into moments of rest and help to support ourselves to make it less exhausting, less wearing, less painful to just go about daily activities and do things. It gives us the ability to recharge before we get so ill that we just burn out. It makes life enjoyable. It makes it more possible that our kids confront and that we can engage with activities like play and joy and fun and hobbies and interests and creativity. It helps us to thrive instead of just surviving. Even just in a pragmatic way, it makes it more sustainable and it's more economical for energy usage. It makes things take less effort. It makes them drag less as you're doing them. It makes things just run a bit smoother, which means that we have more energy to do more things. There's a lot of barriers to self-compassion and a lot of reasons why it might be difficult for us to access, especially as trauma survivors, because of gestures broadly. It's not a skill that we're inherently taught. It definitely wasn't a skill that we were inherently taught. We've had to learn it from scratch, and we've had to have it modeled to us by people around us, by our pets, and then we've had to learn to practice it with each other and build it really as a skill, like a muscle. Some of the barriers to self-compassion could be never being taught it by caregivers in childhood, never having it modeled to us. Everything modeled to us was the complete opposite, which is why this is such a great antidote and why it helps so much, because it's giving us things that we never had. It also does mean that it's something we maybe have to learn from scratch a lot of the time. Other barriers to self-compassion could include having a really judgmental inner critic. I don't mean a persecutor. All of us that have experienced CPTSD tend to have really strong internal criticism. Some people in a system adopt that as a role. I know the parts of me that are persecutors. Definitely, I felt very much like I identified with that. Like that was my purpose for a very long time. And I know that we have other people in here who feel the same. It could be really difficult to see my identity as somebody who used self-compassion or needed it or wanted it or could access it when self-persecution was all I really knew for a long time. And I definitely had to reinvent myself in a way that I couldn't imagine at first, to be able to let go of it as part of my identity. That for me for a while was a barrier. And I think that's definitely one of the reasons why it helps to be able to adapt it. I had a lot of preconceptions about what self-compassion was and wasn't, and allowing myself to just say it's anything that makes me feel like myself. It's allowing myself to take up space however I take up space. That can be self-compassion for me. Sometimes the core beliefs that we hold, if they can get in the way and be barriers to self-compassion, things like I'm not good enough, I don't deserve self-compassion, or I'm strong enough without it, I don't need it, it'll make me weaker to use it. These beliefs have evolved from a place of wanting to protect ourselves, but they can also be quite self-limiting. So just coming to understand ourselves and what beliefs we hold can really help to understand if that's one of the barriers we might face. Protective self-abandonment can be a real barrier to self-compassion. In the parts of me that used to default more to the fawn response, where you get people-pleasing and stuff like that, protective self-abandonment was definitely something that I experienced a lot. And it makes it really hard to show yourself compassion if your brain is saying, my needs have to not matter for us to be safe. Even though that's not the case now, and a lot of the work is in showing ourselves and our brain that we are safe. I understand why, after gestures broadly, our whole lives, that is what our brain thinks we need to be safe. It thinks sometimes we need to prioritize everybody's needs and not have any ourselves. It is self-protective. It is trying to prioritize us in the way the brain thinks we need to. Something that could be a barrier to self-compassion is feeling like nothing we're doing is ever good enough. So if in our early life our caregiver didn't celebrate any of our achievements and didn't acknowledge our goals or moved the goalposts constantly, then we can end up with a brain that kind of just internalized that and learned to repeat it. So now maybe it feels like what we're doing isn't good enough unless it's at an unmeetable standard. And that can be a real barrier. Something we can do to help with that is just learning to really move our goalposts down to a reasonable level. What I'm doing right now is definitely good enough, and sometimes I just have to repeat that because the brain learns through repetition. It learned through repetition to behave this way and to hold these beliefs. And we can flip it to a way that helps us, and we deserve to do that. So just, even if it doesn't feel true, repeating something over and over again, eventually the brain will start to internalize it, and we can choose what it internalizes now and what we repeat. So what I choose to repeat is that what I'm doing is good enough, beyond good enough. And every time we do something like I wash up a cup, or I do something that was difficult but I do it anyway, we stop to reflect and notice and really celebrate it as an achievement. And over time, that helps to remove that barrier because it teaches our brain that an achievement can be at a level that's much lower than maybe the standard we naturally set for ourselves. And that is still a really big achievement. At first it feels weird and uncomfortable and patronizing if you've been taught that this standard has to be ridiculously high, but it's compassionate to allow ourselves to celebrate things that really are achievements when we weren't allowed to acknowledge that they were, and to just be able to see how difficult the things we're doing are. But hey, we're doing them anyway, and that really is amazing. The belief that it is amazing has come over time. At first, I felt very sarcastic, and I sounded very sarcastic as I was saying, oh, well done, I've washed up a cup. But it still goes in, and eventually I start thinking how hard it was to get out of the freeze response to do it, and how brave it is that I kept trying until I could. So the belief comes after the repetition in time. So in all these barriers to self-compassion, to Selves-Compassion, you can kind of see that there's always a protective logic. Like, even if we weren't taught to be compassionate with ourselves, our brain has always done its best to keep us alive and to protect us, and that's still what it's doing. And that's really what the logic of all of these barriers are. It's not intentionally trying to make our lives harder, it's actually trying to keep us alive, and it's trying to keep us safe. And all of these barriers and what some places call self-sabotage is really about self-protection. So we're going to look at that in a little more detail. Some really common symptoms that we get as a system after being through trauma, and what the protective logic of them is. Because if we can understand how our brain is just doing its best to try to protect us, it makes it a lot easier not to blame ourselves for the way that looks, and that can make it easier to be able to practice that non-judgmental self-awareness, to be able to go, this is a part of my experience, it makes sense that it is. It might not be helping me now, but I can still accept two things at once. This is not my fault, this is my experience, and I can change it without having to blame myself for the fact that it's happening. A lot of the time, when we know better cognitively, but we can't change our behavior and make ourselves do better, that's because something like toxic shame is berating us with self-criticism, and that really drains our energy. It's re-traumatizing, because it's probably a lot of what we experienced from caregivers, and it can shut us down very literally into a nervous system state where we can't think clearly and can't choose to act. So self-compassion is an antidote to that, and it can help bring us back to our agency and give us choices and be able to change our behavior. When we know better and we're struggling to do better, generally it's because we are unconsciously shaming ourselves just because it's what we were taught to do, for knowing better but not doing better. And the way that we reverse that is we support ourselves in whatever form that looks. Even if it's difficult to say what I'm doing is amazing, maybe we could just say, I understand why what I'm doing serves a protective function. And then over time, it makes it easier to be able to change our behavior. That's what stops us from being stuck, that self-compassion and that lack of criticism, of shaming, judgments that keeps us shut down. If we remove those, we have the freedom to move a bit more.
kind of built up a picture now of knowing which skill set to use for which protection going off in our brain, when, and why it helps. I've tried to transfer a bit of that knowledge to this graph. So we have a bit of a trauma brain symptom cheat sheet. No one is expecting anyone to memorize this off the cuff, but we will include a public view link for it on Canva. Recommend downloading it as a PDF so that you can zoom in without it blurring, and then get it printed and just have it stuck on your wall so you can see it. And eventually it'll go in if you just repeatedly read. That's a big thing we do, by the way. We write down what helps for what, and we stick it up somewhere that we can see it all the time, like by the kettle, and we just read it all the time. And then if we're waiting for the kettle to boil and it says, breath work can help with these things, we're like, this is an opportunity where I would be bored, where I could practice some breath work and build that muscle. It just really helps, because the repetition and the consistency are what helps. You don't need to practice these things all at once. You don't need to learn them all perfectly. You don't need to do absolutely all of it immediately. We've built this for years. It's just that it can help to have a framework of the map. So this was us. And we're going to generate a bit of selves-compassion organically by understanding the processes in our brains as protective functions. We're going to understand what they look like, and we're going to understand what we can teach our brain to do instead. And all of this can be completely non-personalized, just mechanics. We are literally just working with a computer. It's just software and hardware, and we just have to learn which viruses to basically uninstall and how to use the virus protection like the AVG and how to set it up. It's what our brain is, my folks. And we're just learning to use it. So we have the protection, also could be called a symptom. What is it? How does it protect us? How does it interfere with healing? What skill can we build instead? And how do the skills help? So you can add in. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Did that generate a little bit more self-compassion? Yeah, it did. Thank you. Okay, so protection. Fight, flight. What is it? It's a survival-based nervous system response that brings energy to help us deal with a threat. How does it protect us? It upregulates our nervous system. So if we have our window of tolerance here, this is where everything's chill and we are able to feel our emotions and stuff. Our nervous system sends us into states to deal with threats. So when we are out of our window of tolerance, we are either up-regulated into fight-flight or down-regulated into freeze-shutdown. So the fight-flight response up-regulates our nervous system out of our window of tolerance and into the fight-flight response. It mobilizes us. It releases chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline, which gets us ready to fight or run. It can help us to notice a lot of information in our environment all at once, like hypervigilance, which is if I'm ever in a conversation and I get triggered into the fight-flight response, I might become super observant of somebody's facial expressions, body language. I might have racing thoughts. I might have a lot of anxiety and a lot of energy. I might kind of need to constantly move. I find myself cleaning things a lot. Like, the kitchen can look fabulous after I've gone into the flight response. But it does have some drawbacks. So how does it interfere with healing? We can't think rationally in this state. Our thinking brain literally has gone offline. So it makes it really difficult to make conscious decisions. It can make us feel stressed, anxious, irritable, and rushed. It keeps us in survival mode. It makes it hard to learn new skills or engage with fun or rest. It can be exhausting and a real use of energy. It can be hard to switch off, and the constant fast-paced input of loads of information can just be really draining and overwhelming. None of these are exhaustive lists, just a general overview. So then what skills can we build instead? Breathwork. Breathwork is massive for doing any kind of nervous system regulation, which is a kind of skill set that helps us to deal with trauma on that level. It helps to communicate safety to the nervous system, especially when we breathe a little bit longer out than we do in. The exhale is what communicates we're safe right now, and it can help manually to shift our body back into our window of tolerance out of fight flight. Exercise, especially, I found that different kinds of exercise seem to help. Like sometimes if I've gone into fight flight, doing a bit of cardio can help, and sometimes like punching a pillow can help. It helps to be able to use that energy, because then the chemicals that have been released into our body from our brain sending us into this state, they get to metabolize through us and move out instead of getting stuck in our body. We get to use them for something. So exercise can be really helpful. Self-soothing, anything that can help any parts of you feel safe and feel soothed and feel relaxed. And that could be watching a comfort TV show, it could be listening to soothing music, it could be art, it could be a warm bath or a warm shower, it could be sitting and having a conversation in front of the mirror, it could be soothing safe touch, like somebody inside just putting a hand on my shoulder really helps a lot, or sometimes we'll use the body to just hug or do a butterfly hug, which helps to get both sides of your brain online at the same time, and it helps to kind of bring some balance, which the brain really likes for nervous system regulation. There's a lot of skills for self-soothing. It can be something we have to practice and learn, especially if we weren't taught how to do that because of gestures broadly in our childhood. And it can be something we have to learn from scratch, but that's actually one of the nicer things to learn, just suddenly going, oh my god, something makes me feel better. Something someone in here has just done has made a difference to my emotional state, and it's a lot better. Somatic movements. Somatic is just meaning of the body, so it's like types of therapy skills that work with the body. That somatic experiencing is like feeling your emotions as sensations, working out where they are in your body, what they feel like. Somatic movements can just be like movements that involve the body, so it can involve learning to listen and think, what movement does my body need right now? And at the beginning of therapy we definitely had no clue, complete grey area, just absolutely ocean of confusion to us. But it's okay to not understand all of this or even much of this immediately. It's something that we build, and it is like building a muscle. It's just experimenting. Some people find rocking to be quite soothing. Some people find that you can stand on your toes and drop your heels down. That can be really good if we're feeling angry. So just little things like that, learning to move our body in a way that helps us to release energy. We can use anchoring, which is a concept in mindfulness. I've heard it called grounding before, but that can have apparently triggering associations to the word. I just prefer the word anchoring because I like to think of pirate ships while I heal, and it's something you can learn more about through looking at mindfulness, but it's the concept of using your senses to anchor you to the body and to the present moment. So hearing the noises in our environment with a sense of allowing them to be there without trying to translate what they mean and without trying to respond to them or understand them, just hearing them as sounds, as an experience of hearing, without feeling like we need to do anything about them. And then anchoring through the sense of touch. So like, we're quite used to doing this at this point because we've practiced quite a lot, so I'm kind of constantly a bit aware of like the feeling of my clothes on my shoulders, or the feeling of like my arm against the edge of the bed, what I'm sat on, my feet pushing into the floor. You just kind of scan through your body and the points of contact that it's making, where you feel supported by your environment or where a piece of clothing feels comforting. And we've learned to kind of keep scanning these things, and then over time you just build up an awareness of it and you kind of hold on to it more naturally. So now it's like our default is more likely to be being in our body and being in the present, which makes it easier to stay anchored. At first, when we first started practicing, our default was not any of this. Our default was to be completely floating out of our body, not really in the room either, anxiously catastrophizing, thinking about everything that could go wrong and what if thoughts about the future, or dragged back into flashbacks and re-experiencing gestures broadly. And this was one of the things that we learned that really helped us to compensate for those things and to deal with those, to pull us out of flashbacks, to prevent them, and to help us to be able to experience new safe sensations in the here and now. Anchoring through senses, massively helpful, and you can learn a lot about it by just YouTubing some mindfulness tutorials. walking, especially in nature, like our brains have not evolved for the society we live in, and it could just really help calm our sweet little animal brains to go outside into nature and be around trees. Also, standing by something that's larger as an object, it can help our brains to feel like predators can't see me now because I am hidden behind large thing. So even just standing with our back to a wall can feel safer if our brain's like, there is a threat. And at the same time, we do tend to try and go, okay, let's look at the environment, let's look at things in the room. Where is the threat right now in this room? And keep pulling it back to in this room, because it helps our brain to go, oh, actually in this room right now there isn't a threat. But just little things that you can do to help your poor sweet little animal brain that's doing its best to keep us alive, to know that there are not threats right now. Cold water exposure, that's a kind of nervous system regulation that really helps as well. It basically just, there's a whole science behind it that is completely escaping me right now, despite the fact that I know it. Oh, so I don't have access to the part of me that knows it right now. But there is a whole science behind why cold water exposure helps. Cold showers, and even just getting your hands wet in the cold sink or holding an ice cube or something is really good for sensory grounding, for helping to bring us to the present and to regulate our nervous system. We used to get really bad migraines as well that would go up the back of our neck and through our eyeball, and that's actually where the vagus nerve runs. Stimulating the vagus nerve is something that can help us to regulate our nervous system and come back into that rest and digest, is what the safe window of tolerance zone is called. It can help us to come back into rest and digest. And something we learned was, if we put something really cold at the back of our neck where we get the pain that can turn into migraines, sometimes it can prevent or reduce a migraine that nothing else touched, and I think it's through the vagus nerve. Thought management. Preventative if used before a certain point of being triggered. That will be explained by Connor later. That has been explained by Connor later. That bit has been recorded, but you have not seen it, and it has not been edited yet. So it's all the way through time, much like Doctor Who. So how do these skills help? Well, breathwork tells our nervous system and our body that we're safe. It literally communicates safety on a physiological level. Because one thing that happens is when we go into the fight-flight response, we may notice our breathing may get lighter, may get faster. And we can kind of manually reverse that process by slowing our breathing down intentionally and breathing deeper and breathing out a little longer than we breathe in. Exercise and movement can help us to channel and release the energy and chemicals created so that the response can move through us. Anchoring and using nature helps us to stay connected to our body and to the present, which can help us contain the experience and give it space to metabolize out of us without getting pulled into the future or the past. Cold water can help us to regulate our nervous system and bring us back into our body. Thought management can include finding counter-evidence to change self-limiting beliefs. There's a lot of terminology here that it's okay if it doesn't make sense. There are lots of different things all pulled together from different skill sets, and it's taken us like 6 years to research and understand all of these. It's okay if it takes a little bit to just research them, but I thought if we do it this way, at least there is a smorgasbord of options, and whatever thing, you know, speaks to whoever's watching this at the time, you might think, oh, that feels relevant. You could just look at that. Like, honestly, just prioritize the one or two things that feel relevant, and you got time. Trauma makes us feel a sense of urgency, like we have to get it all done right now. But actually, that's just the trauma brain being online. It's not an accurate reflection of what's happening, and in the here and now, we're safe, and we have time to look at these things in our own time. So finding counter-evidence to change self-limiting beliefs. So, a self-limiting belief could be, oh, I have to do everything right the first time. Perfectionism. It could be, oh, I need to research all of these things right now. I'm behind. And I know we've definitely had those beliefs instilled from trauma, and they're things that just come up as like an automatic first thought and can generate panic. And self-limiting is kind of self-explanatory here, isn't it, really? It's just that we're not thinking clearly when we're thinking in threat detection, but it feels like objective reality at the time.
They're coming from beliefs that don't give us a very open or expansive view of reality and of ourselves as it is, because we tend to lose access to things like knowledge of our achievements, knowledge of our accomplishments. Like, when we get triggered, we really can only remember anything ever going badly, and it feels like that's all that has happened and all that ever will happen. And we can have a lot of beliefs that are really ingrained that kind of use that style of thinking, and then everything looks like that. But it's not all that there is. It's just that the brain has like telescoped onto that one thing, and we need to be able to expand it to be able to see more possibilities that are out there. So finding counter evidence that change those beliefs over time is one way to do that, where it's like pointing the telescope in a different direction or zooming out to go, there's a bigger picture here, you know, there's more things than what the self-limiting beliefs see. So that's kind of how we find counter evidence, is like, you know, say I think I'm looking at all of this, I feel overwhelmed, I think, oh my god, I'm so far behind, I've got to research all of this stuff immediately to even get a chance. Well, that's kind of quite a self-limiting belief, and it's going to spur on a lot of anxiety. And I might challenge that belief with questions, because if your brain gives you a statement, it's a bit inescapable. And if we reframe a statement that our brain has given us as a question, we can challenge a belief like that. So if it says, oh my god, I've got to do all this immediately, I can go, have I got to do it all immediately? And sometimes you have to follow a chain of questions, but already personally I could go, okay, no, I don't have to do it all immediately. You know, finding counter evidence might be, I think about the times when I've thought this before, when everything feels rushed. And at this point I've gotten quite practiced at going, okay, this is a thing that happens when I'm triggered. I know it's a thing that happens when I'm triggered. So I can already quite easily think back to like all these times I've thought I had to do something immediately, and it's been wrong, and it's been okay to just focus step by step, and actually that's been a lot more helpful, and I've been very successful just focusing step by step. So I'm kind of remembering all of the ways I'm capable and going, oh, look at these things I have actually achieved by doing it one step at a time. And then finding counter evidence can be both remembering things like that, or it can be putting things into practice step by step, just slowly, where we prove our brains wrong. We prove this belief wrong. Self-limiting beliefs can come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and the way that we can challenge them and give them counter evidence can really come in a lot of shapes and sizes as well. So that's part of when we get to know ourselves more and we do reflection exercises like journaling, we might notice thoughts that are repeated, and we might go, okay, that's coming from a belief. Does it feel limiting? And then trying to work out, you know, what is my brain taking as evidence for that, and how can I give it counter evidence? Or if we don't trust people to be safe, but we know they are safe people, if I'm having a moment of doubt because gestures broadly equals trust issues, then I can find counter evidence through thinking of a history of their behaviour and thinking, okay, remembering all these times this person has acted in a way that repairs ruptures when they happen, that speaks to us calmingly, that gives us the benefit of the doubt, you know, all the things they've done that make me think they're safe. And I can give it counter evidence in this moment by finding a way to communicate openly with them and giving them a chance to behave in a different way than the belief makes my brain predict they're going to behave. So if the self-limiting belief is saying this person isn't safe, I have to shut down, I'll be judged, but I know they're a safe person, through a history of the pattern of their behaviour, I can give my brain counter evidence, although it's scary at first to do, by challenging that belief, by giving them the opportunity to disprove it. So that might look like telling them quite openly, look, I feel afraid of this right now, I feel afraid you're going to judge me, and then really being open to them responding in a way that I don't expect, and really countering by looking for evidence that they are safe, because my brain's trying to find evidence that they're not safe because that's the belief it has, and it wants to confirm that belief because that would keep us safe, protective.
but it's also not helpful when the person is safe. So what I can do is I can do the opposite. I can look for proof that what they're doing right now is good enough. I can look for proof that what they're doing right now shows they love me, instead of my brain going, oh, they paused a bit before they spoke, that must mean they don't really care, because that's it, trying to find evidence to fit the belief that they're not safe. And I can do the opposite by saying, okay, they're opening a dialogue with me about this, even though it's hard. That shows they really do care. So you can get counter evidence for your brain like that. So another one, protection, freeze-fawn response, freeze/fawn response. So what is it? It's a survival-based nervous system response that immobilizes, suppresses our emotions and our needs and our behaviors, and it disconnects us to deal with threat. So if we have the window of tolerance and fight-flight is up-regulating, our nervous system is up-regulating us to be out of our window of tolerance up here, freeze and fawn down-regulates us to be down here. It brings immobilization, slows, it's heavy. So how does it protect us? Freeze and fawn both disconnect us from our emotions, our needs, and our body. So if we can't escape the threat, we can reduce its impact. Freeze immobilizes us to protect us. Like, think big dinosaur cannot eat me if it cannot see me. And unfortunately, our brain sometimes gets the impression that the emails are a big dinosaur. I don't know, what it's trying to do is think that if I sit very, very, very still and I'm very quiet, this email will not find me. As China's best, honest. It just hasn't evolved to deal with this society. So fawn tries to appease the threat to prevent harm. Which is a little harder to do with an email, because it's like, you know, if I just smile at it nicely, maybe the email will go away. But you can see how it might apply to people. Fawn response is what generates these people-pleasing behaviours and makes us feel like our needs will be a burden, will be too much, or have to be kept quiet because otherwise we'll be rejected or abandoned or disliked in some way. That's what happens. That's why we can go into those states, and I know it can be really deeply frustrating to experience. It's also not our fault. It's not our fault that it happens. It's a brain response that's literally triggering a nervous system state that it thinks we need to survive. And it might not be what we need to survive now, but we got to teach our brain and our nervous system that slowly, because we're not making the conscious choice to go into the freeze response and to sideline our needs to placate other people. It's actually trying to prioritize us, because it thinks that if we regulate other people's emotions and meet all their needs, then we'll be safe. And we've learned this somewhere in our childhoods, in gestures broadly, and it was a great protection at the time. It really worked. It's just the sad thing is that now it can go off automatically still because it worked then, and our brain still thinks it's necessary, when in reality we have a lot more agency, we have a lot more power and control now to do things differently. Some parts of our brain just don't realise, so it still sets off this response, and we have to teach it slowly over time that we don't have to do these things to be safe. How does it interfere with healing? You can have a lot of difficulty with brain fog. Brain frog would be so much cuter, wouldn't it? Brain fog for the freeze response. Low motivation for the freeze response. Shut down for the freeze response. Numbness, also freeze. Immobilized, freeze. Depression, also, I think, is more likely to be like functional freeze, which is a blended state between the fawn and the freeze response. So that can look like being really good at your job and being really functional until you get back in the house, and then you're just stuck staring at something for 5 hours, unable to really do anything, even reach for a glass of water that's next to you, because the brain's going, I need to appease these people to be safe, and that's all we have the energy for, because it's a survival response. And then we are so exhausted from all of that and still stuck. It's like driving with the handbrake on, really, I think is a good way to describe it. We're disconnected from our own needs and emotions in both of them. And then, yeah, people pleasing is what happens with the fawn response. You also get a lot of burnout. Protective selves-abandonment, which I think I've mentioned, that one is a real not fun experience, but it makes sense. So what skill can we build instead? Well, self-compassion is literally the antidote. Self-compassion thaws freeze. if we're stuck in the freeze response, critical thoughts and shame can make it worse. It can make it compound on itself. It can freeze us more. If I'm sat there and I can't move and I think, why can't I move? I should be able to move. I'm not trying hard enough, and I shame myself for that response, then it like closes me down further. It increases that response because those thoughts feel like a threat to our brain. They can be really re-traumatizing if it's stuff we heard a lot in our childhood, and our brain thinks, why am I still not good enough? And it tries to freeze more to get away from the threat. So it can become like this cyclical snowball. But self-compassion breaks that chain. Selves-compassion is an antidote. It literally thaws the freeze response. And that can look different. Like for us, when we were stuck in the freeze response, sometimes self-compassion looked like saying, it's okay that this is happening. It sucks and I'm really not enjoying the experience, but it's not my fault. And it's okay about me, you know, it doesn't have a bad meaning about me as a person. It doesn't mean I'm lazy, it doesn't mean I'm not trying. It sucks to experience and it's not my fault. And at the time, that was really what self-compassion looked like for the freeze response. And it's evolved since then and built. But at first, it really was just going, this sucks, and I'm not choosing it. Sometimes also reminding ourselves, that it's safe. It's like, I'm in the house. It might suck, but the dishes can wait. Like, it doesn't have a meaning about me, constantly repeated. Needed that quite a lot. Like, all these things that it feels like I should do can wait. Realistically, it's okay to be sat here just processing. I don't have to be functional to be loved and to be safe. I am safe even if I can't get the dishes done right now. And I think a lot of it is just about genuinely coming to a place where you feel like that's okay. And that can take a lot of shifting our beliefs and a lot of like giving those affirmations to counter for it. Especially if we were raised in a household where people put a lot of our conditions of worth on how productive we could be, it can be really going like against the current to teach ourselves to believe these completely new things to get out of these responses. So self-compassion, affirmations, like all of what I was just giving, basically the positive, like, you know, it doesn't mean I'm lazy if I can't wash the dishes. It's genuinely really difficult to deal with this level of response. I'm not choosing it. It's not my fault. You know, those are affirmations in that moment. And it's just about finding what makes your body relax, even a microscopic amount more. Because the freeze response also, you find your muscles are really tense. You might be immobilized, but there's a lot of energy being suppressed, so it's like it can be very tense. Sometimes it can be completely shut down, which is a bit of a different further down response, but sometimes with the freeze response we can have really racing thoughts but be unable to move. So some gentle movement can help to move us out of that. Sometimes our brain thinks it's not safe to be seen, so what can help is thinking something like, could it be safe to just move my toe just inside my shoe where no one can see it? Could it be safe to just move my fingertip where no one can see it? And to just slowly start to bring movement that way. Maybe even just starting by breathing, we might notice that we've been holding our breath for a long time. So could it be safe to just take a bit of a deeper breath, a bit of a slower exhale? And then slowly we can build a bit more movement. Generally with the freeze response, slow, gentle movements like swaying, rocking, stretching tends to be helpful rather than with fight flight. It tends to be like getting energy out, so faster movement can help, but with the freeze response I find like slow, gentle, especially pressure, warmth, those things help a lot. Self-soothing, again, that's just literally anything that makes any of yous feel and sometimes it can take experimenting to find what that is. Like, we didn't know what that was at first, and we had to find it, we had to learn. But you can Google self-soothing ideas, and you can get like a list of things to try. Thought management, finding a choice we can make, however small, because freeze happens when our brain says there's no way to escape the threat and it shuts down. And it's a clever protection because we're disconnected from our experience. Maybe the threat won't see us, but if it does, we're so numb that it limits the impact. So it makes perfect sense. Also, unfortunately, I'm not in danger of being eaten by the dishes. I just feel like I am. So it's not the most adaptive strategy in this day and age where it's responding to, but it doesn't know that. So we need to show our brain in that state, bearing in mind it's quite hard to think clearly, that we can make a choice. And this is where being part of a system has been really helpful for us. I honestly, that has been a superpower, because the amount of times that I've been unable to think clearly and he has asked me something really small, like, what would you like to drink? And a lot of the time, if I can't move, he still can. Sometimes it seems to affect the whole body and it's really hard for any of us to get around it. But sometimes it seems like I can't move and I also can't let go of the front. Nothing feels safe. So I'm like, you can't take over. I have to be still. And it can be quite a difficult, definitely not at all forcing anything, experience of us just trying to soften into allowing a tiny bit of movement, and me trying to soften into letting go just a little bit, as much as feels safe. Trying to do anything in extremes or in rushes is kind of just doing what the trauma has already done. So we want to find a different way around it that's more compassionate. So it's very slow titration, a drop of water in a whole vat. I was imagining food colouring, really, but you know, slowly over time. So finding any choice we can make, even if it's just how I'm thinking. Sometimes we really can't move at all, and the only choice I can make is what I think back to my thoughts, because sometimes I can't even control the thoughts that are coming up. And sometimes a lot of people are thinking a lot of things and I don't want to suppress or shut anyone down, and I can't control that. So sometimes the only choice I can make is how I respond to the thoughts I can hear, and choosing to respond with compassion, choosing what I think back to the thoughts I can hear. Sometimes that's the first choice we can make. But the point is that if we make a choice, we show our brain and the nervous system state it's put us into that we are not helpless, we are not powerless, we have agency, we have something in our control, even if it's small. The next choice could be how slowly I breathe, how deeply I breathe. The next choice could be, can I wiggle my little toe? So how do these skills help? Selves-compassion thoughts freeze. Affirmations reassure us of safety and of choice. That's when we could be sitting there thinking specific affirmations. Like, affirmations come up a lot, but it's always going to be specific to the situation. And that's something, again, you can play around with and learn what your brain likes to hear. Like, I don't have to sit completely still to make this video. I'm allowed to move, especially if my legs have gone dead. That's an affirmation that I needed to hear right now to be able to do something. Oh my god. That helps me. So affirmations are always going to be a bit specific. And in this case, it could be, I have the power to make a choice. Gentle movement can help communicate safety to our body and tell it that it's okay, it's safe to mobilise again. We don't have to stay still and quiet to be safe. It's like doing the opposite of what our brain thinks we need to be safe. So again, it's building that counter-evidence. This belief that you have that we have to be still to be safe isn't true right now. Look, let me show you with counter-evidence because we can move. But it's also got to be titrated, so that little drop into a big vat, because if we just try to go, look, I can move, our body really might not like that in the freeze response. That might feel way too visible. So you want to do it at enough of a level that it feels safe enough to try. And that could take some trial and error just to work out what's right for you and use. Self-soothing can help to comfort us, and especially younger parts, it's so important to be able to give that space to the kids in our system, like putting on some cartoons and finding like soft, squishy toys and sensory items and things like that, just really giving them the space to say your needs matter, these things can help, and bringing them to us. Those are amazing self-soothing techniques. It can help us come back into our window of tolerance, Thought management can include reframing beliefs, reframing a meaning about us and our brain that our brain may have assigned. So like with the dishes, if my brain's instilled the belief that it's lazy if I don't do the dishes, it would be reframing it to be like, what I'm dealing with is really quite difficult actually, and it makes sense that I don't have the energy to survive all of this and do the dishes, and that's okay. Finding positive interpretations for a situation or behaviour for us and say for others. So that'd be like if my brain thinks this person hesitated before speaking, oh no, that means they don't care. Finding a positive interpretation would be thinking, maybe I mean a lot to them and they really want to say the right thing right now and they're not sure where to start. Which I want to make it very clear is not the same as finding an excuse for a behaviour that is not okay. We don't do that. So this is only for people who, after we've seen a pattern of the history of their behaviour and enough evidence to say they're safe people, we do positive interpretations for people that we know to be safe in a pattern of their behaviour. Like, you gotta earn the positive interpretations. But, you know, we can use them for us, and that's really important for developing compassion. Especially, it can really help when, like, if I have a really negative view of myself, like, will you please help me?
Go with what just happened.
Oh, I thought I can't move. I was like, my leg's gone completely to sleep. And I was like, oh, I don't want to move right now. And then I felt bad about that for a second because I thought, am I minimizing my needs because I feel like I need to not take up space and not be weird by not moving while I'm being filmed? That's quite a negative interpretation of my behavior. I didn't realize until he was just like, maybe you're trying to make this video as accessible to people as possible, and bearing in mind, how did you phrase it? You phrased it much better.
Maybe you're trying to make sure that you come across as regulated, calming, soothing. You're trying to make it easier for people to feel soothed when they watch you.
That makes sense. And when you said it as well, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds accurate. So sometimes just asking another person in your system, hey, how are you interpreting what I just did, what I just felt? Did you feel what I just felt? You have to kind of build connection for that one. We couldn't at first feel what each other felt, but now some of us can. And that can be a really cool tool. Like, I love the fact that my thoughts are peer reviewed, honestly. Sometimes just being able to go, what are you seeing in what I just thought? How are you seeing me right now? It can really help to get like a stable spirit level of somebody else's interpretation of you from within your own brain. That's a superpower. Using affirmations for people pleasing, that can help with the fawn response and the freeze response. Things like, I don't need to attune to other people's emotions to be safe. Actually, you can Google a lot of these specifics. Once you know what's going on, you can like Google affirmations for people pleasing or affirmations for anxiety, things like that, affirmations for not feeling good enough. Like, once you know what to use where, what we do is we screenshot a bunch of affirmations and set them as our lock screen on our phone. So then somebody doesn't have to remember to do it. They'll just switch in, unlock the phone and go, oh, and then read them. And then you read them throughout the day. We can also write them on the back of our hand, put them on sticky notes in the environment, just something so that they are repeatedly getting instilled. Like all of the criticism did, we reverse it by instilling positive affirmations instead. Just how important choices and how we can communicate safety to that part of our brain by making a choice. So there's a lot of different things that we have dealt with, a lot of different symptoms that are protective, like we've just done the fight-flight response, the freeze-fawn response. But there is also on here dissociation, self-criticism, judgments, cognitive distortions, and narratives, which we'll explain a little bit about.
Narratives is that thing our brain does where it puts a story behind something. You might hear people saying, oh, my brain is telling me the story that, and that's quite a helpful tool that we've started using to distance from what feels like objective reality but can be really unhelpful. So like, if we start talking to our partner and he starts doing something like spinning on the chair. And I might start thinking things like, he's not interested in what we're saying, his body language is telling me that he's bored and that we're boring him. So then that's a narrative in my mind. That's my mind is telling me a story that I'm boring him and that's why he's doing this behavior. I don't know what he's thinking in that moment, but it can feel very much like objective reality. Like, oh, this person is doing this thing because of what I'm doing. This person is doing this thing and that means this about me. Now we tend to just tell him, the story my brain is telling me is that you're doing this because you're bored, and he'll go, no, I'm doing it because I have ADHD and I'm trying to listen, and we'll go, oh yeah, that tracks. So a narrative is the story our mind tells us to make sense of what we're feeling and what's happening around us, and they're not always accurate. Cognitive distortions are our brain's shortcuts. It's trying to protect us as best it can by categorizing information really quickly based off of past experiences. So something like black and white thinking, thinking everything's all this or all that, or somebody's all good or all bad. And it's really common when you've been through trauma for the brain to think like this, because after trauma it would make sense that in dangerous situations we have to think about things and categorize them really quickly. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this safe? Is this not safe? What do I need to do? And when we come out of an experience like that, or a lifetime of experiences like that, our brain can just fall into these thinking habits, but it can apply them in ways that aren't really helpful to our current day situation, because a lot of the time there's more nuance and more grey area than that, and it really helps to be able to hold multiple things at once. We've learned as we heal, but we still fall into things like black and white thinking. So that's a cognitive distortion. I would recommend looking up cognitive distortions. It has helped us so much to learn what they look like, how to spot them. There's also blind belief. So because we feel something, it must be true. So like, because I feel shame or anxiety because that person didn't smile when I smiled at them, it must mean there's something wrong with me. It's not true, but it's an example of how if we feel something strongly, our brain can say it must be true because we're feeling it so strongly. There's loads of different cognitive distortions. Filtering the evidence, that's a great one that gets us. I love that one. That's where our brain has a belief like, I'm not good enough, and it is so firmly holding on to that belief that it will ignore information that counters that belief, and it will only see information that confirms the belief it already holds. Real pain. A lot of what we share that's helping us to find compassion for each other and for ourselves is also learning to spot these patterns of thinking, learning more about them. So if I find that I'm thinking things like always, never, this person always does this, I always do this, that can be a sign that it's thinking using cognitive distortions. Journaling can be really helpful to revealing these things to us, and we can see over a pattern of time kind of what ones our brain might go to, and then it's easier to spot them in the moment, and it's just so relaxing to suddenly be like, oh, my brain's just filtering the evidence. I am good enough. There's actually, look at all these things I've done that are good enough that I just didn't think of or didn't remember or didn't see, because that's been ignored because it doesn't confirm the belief our brain has. So it's looking for evidence that I'm not good enough, and that's all it's going to see in somebody's body language, in somebody's response to us in a situation, even if that's not all that's there.
And then toxic shame. So there's a lot of these different protections, which it can be very natural to feel critical of ourselves about if we don't understand that it's just a process, It's very mechanical, really. Our brain is hardwired to do this thing when X or Y or Z happens. And it can really help us to understand why it protects us, what it is, that it's not our fault, but then also how we can move out of it and do something different instead. It would take a really long time to go over all of these, unfortunately. I would love to. We can, in future, go over some more of these in videos on our channel if there is a desire for them, if these have been helpful, and this whole sheet will be available to find somewhere in the description. Since we're on self-compassion, I'll try and go through this one really quickly, and then I'll edit so. Self-criticism, judgmental thoughts. What are they? Harsh internal responses to ourselves, often internalised and shaped from our early environment. Self-criticism, part of a mental process that categorizes and evaluates, and that's judgments. It's trying to categorize something and put it into a box so we can understand it quickly, so we can be safe from it. So how does it protect us? Self-criticism can be an attempt to prevent rejection or abandonment from our family and community, and group acceptance is an inbuilt survival need for humans when we're born. Judgments can help us to categorize and predict, or feel like we can predict, which can remove the fear and uncertainty of the unknown and give us a sense of control. So, how do these things get in the way of healing? Protective withdrawal, isolation, preventing perceived failure by not trying, missed opportunities for growth, love, connection, joy, can shut us down so that we're not able to engage with things like hobbies, socializing, fun, rest, creativity. We've been in stable addiction recovery for the last 15 months, I think. And one of the things that really helped us to be able to make that recovery sustainable was changing the critical thoughts that would shut down ideas. Because if kids in here or other parts of us felt like, oh, I really want to colour, and our first thought was no, somebody will laugh at us, no, it's going to be terrible, no, these things will go wrong, no, it's too hard, no, I can't be bothered, no, we don't have time. That kind of criticism would just close us down. And something that really has made recovery from trauma and from addiction so sustainable is being able to change what we think in response to the ideas that come up and the desire for play and creativity. And when someone thinks, I want to do that, we have their back now immediately. Even if I have this trauma response of fear or anxiety for how it goes, I still go, you know what, yeah, maybe I feel afraid right now, but we can do hard things. It's okay. And we're safe to try them. And yeah, we're going to put on cartoons. Yes, we're going to go do colouring. And even if we just manage to do it for a couple of minutes, just making sure that what we think back to those critical thoughts is something that gives us space, that allows, that brings in compassion by blocking out the criticisms that we would hear, telling us that it's not worth doing that, so we can feel like, you know what, we do deserve to play. How else does it interfere with healing? It can make us feel like we have no value to contribute by engaging or responding. So like there's no point in even responding back to our friends because we won't say anything right, or they'll take it this way, or we might hurt their feelings. All those kind of thoughts that just make us disengage. It can make us see perceived threats, whether or not they're really there, in people, responses, or their lack of responses. It can make us feel unsafe and can keep us looping through shame spirals and the 4F, fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. So what skills can we build instead? Selves-compassion. Massive antidote to criticism and judgments. Sometimes for us that means one of us shouting affirmations over the critical thoughts to just drown them out for the other people in here. Really acting as like a shield so that our kids don't have to hear it while we're hearing it and we are just screaming counter affirmations. We are good enough. We're great at drawing. We can do it. We can watch cartoons. But having like a lot of different people to do that is so much better now than it was before, when we kind of all didn't know how to fight them. So, you know, as terrifying as it could be when you have a bunch of people screaming criticisms at you, it gets so much better than we could have ever imagined when all of these people have your back and we are all on the same team and we are all fighting to try and make life more joyous and more incredible for all of us and our kids in here. Cognitive reframes, mentioned before. Gratitude lists. Self-gratitude lists. You could just do them in your head. You could just think, if the word gratitude doesn't work, it can be easier. Sometimes there's barriers to thinking of gratitude, because if gratitude has been used to be like, oh, you should be grateful, then that should is just applying another form of pressure. So sometimes the association we have to the word gratitude can make it hard. But sometimes we could just think, what have we done that's kind of okay? What have we done that's kind of cool? What have I done that's enough? And it's just that process of thinking and looking for those things, just putting that lens on and looking over our actions. And the more we do that and the more we build that muscle, the more it teaches our brain to spot things we've done that are good. And then the feeling of gratitude and of joy and of pride comes over time after repeating this. Noticing and celebrating achievements, massive, massive. Finding counter evidence, curiosity, being able to practice curiosity leaves things open. It stops us from closing things down into a box of judgments, and it allows us to leave the space open to just wonder and to just not have to categorize and know right now, but to just wonder about our experiences. Bringing curiosity is one of the greatest gifts we can bring each other as a system, and sometimes it's easier to do it for other people than it is for yourself. Like, sometimes I'm a bit afraid from having so many years of having, quite painful interpretations of my behavior thrown at me and having internalized those. So sometimes I'm scared to work out why I'm thinking something, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And someone else in here just going, where did that come from? Or what does that mean to you? Or can you explain more about what you're experiencing? And having them do it without like a set goal, Like, I'm coming at it from a place of I'm afraid in case my motivation is something that will make me shame spiral about myself. And they're not. A lot of the time they're coming at it from genuine curiosity. And that really helps to open it up to different positive interpretations of myself and possibilities that would have been hard to see without that. Curiosity literally is the way to counter for judgments. Building distress tolerance to the unknown, being able to feel safe at the same time as uncertain, like teaching our brain that we don't have to immediately categorize something and put it in a box to be safe. That makes it easier not to make judgments, because if it's okay to not know something and it's not a point of survival, and we can just build the ability to feel safe not knowing things, then that removes the need for our brain to make judgments, to categorize. So you kind of see how these things are just protections. They are just supposed to keep us safe. And they were adapted really well for the environments of gestured broadly. But now it's just about readapting to the new environment that we're in as we heal. It's just about learning how to use different skills, like installing different software for different situations.
Description: a boy in a black and white hat with little dangly metal clip bits on it and a Spider-Man hoodie sits talking to the camera. In the background, there's a hanging tapestry with the moon and stars in the night sky.
My name's Connor, and I use he, him pronouns.
So, the stress response process. The reason we can't just think our way out of a stress response, right? So you encounter a trigger. Let's make this simple by just saying somebody shouts at you. So your emotional brain identifies potential threat to safety and sends an alert. So that's the dread that responds. The rational brain checks out the threat and confirms it's real. This is what we might have somehow, some places, heard referred to as narratives and cognitive distortions. And the rational brain then, once the rational brain has confirmed it's real, it switches off to let the emotional brain take over. After this point, we can't think our way out of a trauma response because the thinking part of the brain has gone offline and said, okay, you deal with it, to the emotional brain. The emotional brain then initiates the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, and that's when our nervous system changes state, and then it's not in our control, it's just a reaction to try to keep us safe. So we react and gain distance from the trigger. This could be shouting at someone, running away, freezing, people-pleasing, just examples of whichever of the 4 Fs our brain chooses to deal with the perceived threat. And the word perceived is really important because, while the reason our brain does this is very valid and it really was a real threat in the past, now it tends to be, a lot of the time, it's a perceived threat. So it's not actually a threat, but it really feels like it is a threat to our survival. So that's why the brain does this whole process. After we've dealt with it, the rational brain comes back online and helps soothe us, or our thoughts can become new triggers and we can loop through this response. Like when we were just living in the fight-flight response, basically, and stressed all the time, because our thoughts would become a new trigger by thinking things like, oh, I should be able to deal with this, why can't I deal with this? And that would keep us looping through this cycle, because every new thought is a new trigger that feels like it's
a threat, so then it keeps switching the rational brain offline, and the emotional brain keeps responding. So we could do this differently. So there's a trigger, say someone shouts, the emotional brain identifies a potential threat to safety and sends an alert. That's the drop, dread. The rational brain checks out the threat. Now, it doesn't have to confirm it's real. The rational brain checking out the threat could be like, we're in the middle of a public room and somebody shouts. That's the trigger. My gut going, ugh, horrible. That's the emotional brain identifying the potential threat to safety and sending an alert. Then the rational brain checking it out. If it was going to confirm it was real, it would be narratives and cognitive distortions. That would be me getting thoughts like, that person's yelling because they're mad at me because I've done something wrong. I gotta do X, Y, or Z to be safe. So what we can do, if this is our point of entry, is we can change the response. So the person shouts, I go, ugh, that's horrible, and my brain starts to think, are they mad at me? And instead of going with it and thinking, this is objective fact, they are mad at me, I have done something wrong, I can change it while the thinking brain is still online, because I can think back to it, and I can manually say, this is a trigger. This is why I'm getting these thoughts. We're not in danger right now. This person shouting is nothing to do with us. It's their experience of reality. It's them responding, and it doesn't mean we've done something wrong. So the thoughts I think at that moment can communicate to the thinking brain and stop it from switching off. So this is the point of entry where we can think our way out of this response before the thinking part of our brain switches off. So then we can use self-soothing skills to tell our body and our nervous system the threat isn't real right now. This can be through breath work, relaxing our muscles, and many other skills we may build. Like maybe the person was shouting because they're excited to see their friends or whatever it was, but maybe we just don't want to be near someone that's so loud. So we can move away and still take, a proactive action that helps as well as doing all of this. So we can start breathing and relaxing our muscles, and that communicates that we're not in danger right now. We could also leave the room and go somewhere safe. And while we're thinking these things like, it's okay, I have agency, I have control, what they're doing isn't my responsibility to fix, we're safe right now, those thoughts are telling the rational brain, it's okay, we got this, you don't have to switch off and let the emotional brain take over. So then if it doesn't switch off, we can keep thinking clearly and logically, and we can keep telling the rational brain that the threat is not real now, and we got this. And it can hear us before it switches offline. And that's why affirmations and counter thoughts and counter evidence are so important. We've heard these things used before, right? You might have heard like cognitive distortions, you might have heard of narratives, you might have heard of affirmations, you might have heard of counter thoughts. They're kind of key concepts when you're like looking for how to manage your thoughts and how to think about your thinking. But this is how it relates to the process when you've been through trauma and where we have to do which thing at which point for it to help. We're going to make this graph available somewhere so that you can see the view-only version, and then feel free to just screenshot it and like get it printed somewhere so that it helps. So, say the rational brain checks out the threat and confirms it's real, using narratives and distortions. That's what those are. It's the cognitive brain saying, yes, this threat is real, and then switching off. What could that look like? So say I'm on a bus, a person's looking at me, I feel a drop of panic in my stomach, and I start to sweat. I have thoughts like, they are looking at me because they think I'm weird, and that means I'm in danger. That's the cognitive distortion, and that's the narrative, and that's the cognitive brain confirming the threat is real. I can't think logically now, or I think myself into a different perspective. I feel an overwhelming sense of panic, I have many racing thoughts, and so I get off the bus in panic. Once I'm off the bus, I begin the process of calming down. This process may or may not take a long time, depending on how long my thoughts spend going over the incident and how well I can soothe myself. And there's just many ways this can present, it's just one example. So that's what that could look like in real time. So you see how it's just a process. It's not something we're choosing to do, it's not something we could be doing better, it's just our brain has gone through this series of processes inside. And it's decided this is the best way to keep us safe, so it switches parts of our brain off, and after that point, we can't communicate to them because they're offline, so that's why we can't always think clearly. So then the goal of practicing coping skills is that we can change how this goes. So at the point where the rational brain checks out the threat, It doesn't have to confirm it's real if we talk back to it manually and think manual thoughts in this moment. So we have thoughts like, oh, this person's looking at me on the bus, that means I'm weird. And we can go, no, it's okay, they might be liking my outfit. Or they could be thinking about something they're stressed by. Either way, their perspective does not define me, and I can't read their mind, so I don't know what they're thinking. But their perspective doesn't have to matter to me. As long as I'm safe in this moment, I don't have to focus on what other people are perceiving me like. So this could look like I'm on a bus, and a person looks at me, feel a drop of panic in my stomach, and I start to breathe slowly, with a longer exhale. That's really important, and there's a big science to why. But basically, it's just important to breathe slowly, and the exhale is the part that communicates safety, mostly to our nervous system. I think counter thoughts, like the story my brain is telling me is based on past trauma, not current reality. Where is the current threat to my safety in the here and now? There's no threat to me if someone thinks I'm weird. Now, with the resources and adult body we have, we can protect ourselves. It's mind reading, which is a cognitive distortion, to imagine what someone is thinking of me. I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe there's a positive interpretation. I breathe slowly, in for 4 and out for 6, and I ask my muscles to relax. I use progressive muscle relaxation, which is like tense them in a patch and then relax them, and then tense them in another patch and relax them, and you move like down your body doing that if they're struggling, and that can help them to relax if just like trying to get them to relax by thinking relax doesn't work. I can listen to music that makes me feel comforted and soothed. If I can't think of my own affirmations or hear other people in my system, then sometimes songs that feel empowering and soothing can help. I use a butterfly hug, which is like you cross your arms and you pat one shoulder and the other, and one shoulder and the other. And that can help to get like both sides of your brain online at the same time. So that can just be a really good way to soothe. And I can move my body in a way that feels safe. Some people find rocking helps. Maybe just holding myself, rocking or tapping on my collarbone to remind my body I'm here with it in the present and we're safe. So that's using all sorts of things like somatic skills, skills from mindfulness, breath work, and it's using stuff to communicate to the body and the nervous system that we're safe, which is like hitting it at a different dimension than just thinking. And the affirmations and the thoughts that we manually think are helping the cognitive side, so we're like going at 2 levels at once to help to manage both of those different aspects and help to communicate safety in both. I use affirmations to tell my brain the threat is not real. I talk to it, I tell my brain it's okay, I got this, we got this. I start to feel better, and I think of ways it might be okay. I stay on the bus and get lost in a good song as my body and I relax together. So you see just in this one example how using different skills at the right moment and understanding it as a process can really, really help to change what happens, because the natural default of the stress response is to follow this side down. And if our thoughts can become new triggers, then if we notice that we're panicking and our thoughts, our rational brain checking out the threat and confirming it's real, so that would be having thoughts like, this person's looking at me like I'm weird. Am I weird? Am I doing something wrong? We see how that could increase the panic. But then if the panic increases too much, the rational brain switches off. So then it goes, yep, it's real. That's it. Emotional brain take over. But you see how using affirmations and like different thoughts at this point can help to prevent that from happening. Because when our brain checks out the threat, we go, no, it's not real. It's okay. We've got this, you don't have to switch off. And then when it stays online, we can think clearly and we can communicate through all sorts of different skills to the nervous system, to the body, and to the brain that we're safe, and it can make it go in a completely different direction. And it's easier to do this when we understand that our brain is following a process, and it's a process we have the power to control if we know where our entry point to use which skill when is. But it's also not our fault that it goes this way. It's just it trying to protect us. And that makes it way easier to like not let our thoughts compound on themselves and keep us looping in a stress response, because we understand that we don't have to criticize or shame ourselves for a response that is just a biological fact and a process. And at the same time, we can appreciate that it doesn't mean we're trapped in that process, because there's ways we can change it. All we need to do is build that understanding and that self-compassion to be able to do it, and we can get out.
So in the spirit of selves-compassion, feel free to congratulate yourselves for just staying with this video, listening and doing your best to be present, whatever that looks like for you. That was a lot of information to receive in a very short amount of time. It's okay if the best way for you to use that is to keep it as a resource on hand and come back to it. Don't feel any pressure to absorb a loss all in a short space of time.
Integration, moving stuff from short-term to long-term memory, only happens when you rest.
Hopefully our video has given you some ways that you can practice self-compassion
and be able to engage with it as a rebellion and a form of activism.
We've loved the opportunity to be able to pass on the things we've learned that have helped us, and we hope that they'll be helpful for anyone watching. Take care of each other, prioritize rest.
Keep being rebels.
We'll see you in the next one.